Imagine this. You are on a seemingly normal flight from Portland to Seattle in 1971. A seemingly normal man sits in front of you, and he has a briefcase. And he passes the flight attendant a note not too far into the flight, and he tells her to look at the note after she dismisses it. You can barely hear him say anything, but he leans in and tells her, "You might want to look at that note, ma'am. I have a bomb." Well, you obviously get very quiet in your seat. You start to stress out if you're going to make it home and see your family again. Because most people that are in this situation don't. But the flight goes normal. It's a little bit longer than it should be by about an hour. But you land safely, you go home, tell your family about it, and then you flip on the news and you see that same flight on your favorite news channel. Yeah, I'm going to be the 100th person to talk about it. But for the very first time on the Croatoan archives, let's open the archives to talk about National Orient Flight 305, which hosted America's favorite Skyjacker, D.B Cooper. The day before Thanksgiving in 1971, people were headed home to see their families. The airports were busy, and security is pretty much non-existent. Now you got to think this isn't just like 9/11, pre 9/11 airport security. This is 1970s airport security. I mean, the pilot was probably packing. So get on the plane. You got a bomb? Cool. Where are you taking it? I want to see it. Get on the plane, right? The man buys a ticket under the name Dan Cooper, not D.B Cooper. We will get to that. The ticket was a one-way ticket for National Orient Flight 305 for $20. That's the most peculiar part of the story. A flight. I mean, it is a one-way flight, but it's still a plane ticket for $20. Can't even get a Big Mac for $20 anymore. You probably can't. I don't know. I don't eat Big Macs. I don't know. My air conditioner has not shut off the entire time I've been filming this. And it's been, no wonder my electric bill's so expensive. Okay. He gets on the plane in Portland, Oregon, and it's headed to Seattle, Washington. Mind you, he carried a briefcase on the plane that was not checked because TSA didn't really exist. And he was almost indistinguishable from pretty much every American man in 1970 in Portland, Oregon. He was described to be between 5'10" and 6 foot and 170 to 180 pounds. And he was white. He wore a black and white suit and had slicked back hair, and wore sunglasses. This is the picture of D.B Cooper. I will put up a picture of D.B Cooper right here. It's the drawing. Nobody knows what he actually looks like. He could look like Tom Hiddleston, like in that one video. I don't know. He might. But Tom Hiddleston's also British, so probably not. But then again, British are just fancy white people. I guess we all came from British people. Anyway, he'd sat on the plane in seat 18C near the back of the plane. He ordered a 7-Up and bourbon and lit a cigarette, which, yes, you could do that in 1971. You could do that in 1971. And they don't let us do anything like that anymore. You can't bring bombs. We can't smoke. We can't bring toothpaste. It's uncalled for. During the flight, he handed a flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, a note. And she didn't open it because she assumed another businessman was trying to flirt with her. The gumption. I don't know. Maybe that did happen. I don't know. Cooper quietly leaned in and said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." She obviously went cold and she sat next to Cooper. He slowly opened the briefcase to let her see. She looked in and saw red cylinders, wires, and a battery, which I would assume it was a bomb. I don't know what briefcase bombs look like. I always wondered what the shoe bomb looked like. Maybe I'll look it up after this. I don't know. Maybe I should do a video on the shoe bomber. Probably not. It's probably not that interesting. I could probably put in like a weird like airport theories or something. Maybe I could put the Denver airport in there. We'll get back to that. So, DB showed her the bomb, or the bomb, which was never proven to be a bomb or not. I'm not really sure why it was never tested to be a bomb or not. I guess the fact that he was gone and the thing didn't blow up, that they kind of assumed it wasn't a bomb, but I still would have checked it. Because who knows, it could have been rigged to go off when he jumped off the plane. It's the 70s, bro. I don't know. It's weird. And from every report from the flight attendants, from Florence Schaffner and another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, and even the captain, other than him, giving demands, he didn't give them pointing a gun at him. He gave them demands politely. Everybody that dealt with DB said that he was a very polite man, that he was a gentleman, even. Besides the fact that he was holding up a plane and threatening everybody with death, he was nice, so it's okay. If you want to threaten people, it's fine. As long as you're handsome and you're nice, it's fine. You're fine. When they landed in Seattle, he wanted $200,000, which, adjusting for good old inflation, is about $1.6 million. Which still doesn't seem like a lot for a ransom, because everybody's like, you have 24 hours to give me $100 million, or whatever. At 1.6, you could barely buy a good truck for that nowadays. It seems like, I don't know. Okay, that's an exaggeration. Get off my back. He wanted it in cash, and he also wanted parachutes and a fuel truck to refuel the plane when they landed. And you may ask yourself, why 4 parachutes? Well, some theorize that he asked for 4 because if he asked for 1, they would give him a dud or a defective parachute. One that isn't meant to open. It's like sewed at the top. It doesn't have the pull straps, so you just die. It's like jumping out of a plane with a backpack on, which it's not very effective. I haven't never tried it, and I really don't plan to. My wife went skydiving. I'll have to ask her what it's like. Well, no, actually, she explained to me in good detail of what it's like. She said it's horrible. She's never going to do it again. And I'll take her advice for it. I wouldn't do it either. So, but one of the parachutes actually was a dud, because that they just know that one was missing because there was one parachute that that was missing and one dud parachute that was missing. So they just assumed that he strapped the money, like stuffed it like from the duffel bag into the dud parachute. Um, at least that's what I found. There's a lot of different theories and things like that about D.B Cooper because it's such an old mystery and it was like such loose crime scene investigation. I mean, yeah, they searched the woods for years, but um, and there was like the whole like the FBI and stuff involved. But other than like taking pictures of the bills, which we'll get to that in a second, they really didn't do any other smart things like they do now. Give them a break. It's 1971. Like in the song "Where the Lights Went Out in Georgia" by Reba, talking about the big belly sheriff, just was wanting to get over a death case because he had a casserole at home. Yeah, that's 70s cops for you. So while the plane circled over Seattle, which is the explanation for the extra hour in flight, they circled over for about an hour. The FBI rushed together all the ransom money, which was $200,000 in 20s for some reason. So we wanted 20s, so they gave him 20s. But before handing them over, the agents took a picture of every single serial number of every single bill. This decision would probably become the most important thing that they did because they were later able to find some of the money, but not all of it. There is a lot of the money, a majority of the money that has never been found. So once the plane landed, the passengers were released safely and the money was loaded onto the plane. He also asked that only 4 people remain on the flight: William A. Scott, the captain; William Radikazak. I'm so sorry that I butchered that name. He was the first officer. Harold E. Anderson, flight engineer; and Tina Mucklow, the other flight attendant that wasn't Florence Schaffner. Florence Schaffner. Hey, sorry, that's not her name. Cooper gave the crew their destination, which was Mexico City. But he had a few very specific instructions, which was strange to say the least. He wanted them to fly as slow as they possibly could, and this was a Boeing 727, which had a unique feature that most planes don't now because they actually fixed that and named it the Cooper vein after him. But we'll get to that in a second. I get ahead of myself a lot. I'm sorry. I'm spoiling the whole video for you. So, sorry. This was a Boeing 727, and it could not fly any slower than about 170 knots. 170 to 180 is like the minimum speed that it can fly, which is about 196 to about 205 miles an hour, somewhere in there. Which still seems like it's fast, but it's not for an airplane. That's actually quite slow. He also wanted the plane to fly around 10,000 feet, which was about 26,000 feet less than it should, because most commercial airlines fly around 34 to 36,000 feet. But another thing that was kind of weird is he wanted the landing gear partially down and the cabin unpressurized. And as you can tell, Cooper had knowledge about airplanes that like most people wouldn't. But he wanted the rear flaps to be at 15 degrees, which is weirdly specific. So that led to people thinking maybe he worked at Boeing, or he worked for an aviation company, or just, worked with airplanes before, because it's just really weird, like, specific knowledge to have. Anyway, so there were actually 3 airplanes, 3 military aircraft scroll on my notes here. There were actually 3 military aircraft that were set behind Flight 305 after it left Seattle, and these 3 planes were unknown to D.B Cooper. He did not know they were there, or at least we don't think he knew they were there. He might have. I don't know. And because I'm a nerd, you are going to hear the planes, because this is the only point that it comes up in the story, that what planes they are, but I'm telling you anyway. 2 Corvair F-106 Delta Dart Interceptor fighter jets, that's a mouthful, were sent from McChord Air Force Base. 1 Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star, it was a trainer aircraft that left at National Guard Air Base. It was like diverted from another mission to follow D.B Cooper. I think that's really cool. But so how they flew was they flew behind it in like S patterns, because they couldn't fly that slow, which was 170 knots. They couldn't fly that slow. So they had to like just do maneuvers and things like that just to keep themselves behind the plane. But one of them was above it and one of them was below it. But they were back a little ways, so the planes were not seen by Cooper. Yeah, but they were set back a little bit, so they weren't seen by Cooper out the window. But he really probably couldn't have seen him anyway, because it was rainy, it was cold, and it was well, not that cold really impairs your vision unless it's snowing, but it wasn't. It was raining, and it was dark outside because it was around 7 when they left, and Thanksgiving, so it's it's already dark by that time. So in a way that it was, the Boeing 727 was special, it had stairs that folded out of the back of the airplane. I will put a picture of that right here. And now most airplanes are on the side. This one was on the back. After this, the planes would either abolish the rear staircase or abolish the ability for them to be lowered during flight, and they would call this mechanism that would deny that called the Cooper vane, which, yes, it's named after D.B Cooper for this exact reason. Just before 8 o'clock, as the plane was flying south through southern Washington, just before 8 p.m., Cooper asked that Tina and anybody else to go into the cockpit and to close the door. And I just think it's cool that she was the last person, Tina Mucklow was the last person to see D.B Cooper alive, or at all, because they never found the body. But just before 8:13 p.m., the crew got a warning light telling them that the rear stairs had been opened. And at exactly 8:13, the plane lurched. On that rainy, cold November night, Cooper jumped. At least that's the only logical explanation. But no one actually saw him jump. Somewhere over the forests of southern Washington, Cooper disappeared into the night. And he's never been seen again. Him or most of the money. So, analysis time. The moment that the plane landed in Reno, Nevada, the FBI got its first look at the crime scene. Nobody actually saw Cooper jump. For all they know, he could have been stowed on the plane somewhere. So they searched from like nose to tail. They searched everywhere, and neither the money, 2 of the parachutes, which again, 1 was a dud, and no Cooper. So, the biggest question, where did he land? Remember, it was raining and dark, but using pilots' testimony, weather reports, and air traffic control records, the heading, the investigators, the headings, all the investigators and things like that, Cooper jumped somewhere over the dense forest of southwest Washington, near the small community of Ariel. And if you're like me, you've never been there, and we aren't missing anything. Picture endless pine forests, steep hillsides, rivers, cliffs, and miles upon miles of nothing. There's just trees and mountains. And again, it was raining and dark, so on top of all that dense forest, you have a recipe for a needle in a haystack. Despite the lack of hope, the search began immediately. The FBI was joined by local law enforcement, military personnel, search and rescue teams, and hundreds of volunteers. And they were searching for anything. They couldn't find anything. They were a boot, a body, the sunglasses he wore, a stack of 20s, nothing. Nothing was ever found, at least in this time. Days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months. Despite it being one of the largest FBI manhunts in history, they found no trace of Cooper even existed. Now, he used an alias. Again, that name was Dan Cooper. We will get to why he was called D.B Cooper a little bit later. Now, again, this is the 1970s, so there's no like major camera systems. There's no like surveillance, at least to a huge degree. And all they had to go off was a drawing of the guy, and but I think my favorite theory is interdimensional travel. No, not really. I don't think that's what happened. I mean, if there's interdimensional Bigfoot, I think there can be interdimensional DB Cooper. What do you think? Now, about the money. They went searching for that as well. But if you'll remember, they photographed all of the serial numbers. So if Cooper spent even one of those 20s at a bank, or like put it in a bank, if he spent it at a grocery store. Heck, if he used it in a claw machine, which I don't even know if they had claw machines in the 70s, but if they did, and he used one, they would know. And businesses all over the country were notified, like, hey, if you have any of these, they gave them a list, which is a long list of serial numbers, you have the obligation to tell us, because that money is stolen. It's ransom money. So for years, people watched their money, wondering if one of Cooper's bills might end up in their hands. But day after day, nothing. No bills showed up, and no one tried to spend the money. The man who had just stolen what would be more than $1 million had disappeared without leaving a single clue. And that's when investigators started asking that even, I guess not really a strange question, but did he even survive? Did he die and get washed away along with the money? I mean, probably. Who knows, right? Like, a guy jumps out of an airplane and disappears in nowhere. I mean, he probably had this planned for a long time, but even then, it's a lot of money. And what are you going to do? You can't spend it if you're frozen to death, or you get hypothermia because it's cold. It wasn't cold enough to snow, obviously, but it's still cold. Wet and cold are never two good things to put together. Well, so let's start with the many people that think that he didn't survive. Like I said, the conditions, he was 10,000 feet in the air, which means he would have been going for his weight about 200 miles an hour. I mean, yeah, he had a parachute, but that's only 10,000 feet. I know a lot of people skydive from that, but not into dense forests, So, I mean, but on top of that, he was jumping out of an airplane in a business suit, dress shoes. You know, he was not equipped for what he was doing. No helmet, which, I mean, okay, they didn't even have helmets when they rode bikes back then. So, I mean, I don't blame him. I think it's kind of stupid. If you hit your head, you hit your head. It's whatever. It builds endurance. We'll go with that. So, on the flip side, there are arguments that he did survive. For one, Cooper seemed well versed in airplanes, so what's to say that he wasn't well versed in jumping out of them? He might have been. He knew that this plane would have the rear staircase. He knew what altitude to fly at. He knew what speed. He knew for some reason that the landing gear needed to be down. He knew that, or at least partially down. He knew that the cabin needed to be unpressurized. Unpressurized, is that a word? I think so. So everything that he did, he suggested planning. And if he'd spent months for this moment, maybe he'd also prepared where he was going to land as well. But where did he go? Right? Like, if they searched that area and they never found him, you would assume that he's dead. So it kind of halted a little bit until 9 years later in February of 1880. Yeah. In February of 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging in the sand along the banks of the Columbia River, the place also known as Tennebar. While playing, he uncovered several decaying bundles of $20 bills. When investigators checked the serial numbers, they matched. Exactly $5,800 of the original $200,000 was recovered. And to this day, that's the only money that has ever been found. I just think that's nuts. That like an 8-year-old boy found $5,800 9 years later. And that's like the only evidence that we have. Let's talk suspects. So, more than 800 potential suspects were reported in. Some people reported their neighbors, family members reported each other, which is crazy to think about. I don't know. Would I like if my brother looked like D.B Cooper, would I turn him in? I don't have a brother, but I don't know. I guess my sister wouldn't look like D.B Cooper. But there were a couple names that stuck around. One of them was Cooper McCoy. He did the same thing that Cooper did, but he didn't get away with it. But he didn't really look like Cooper, so it was kind of dismissed. Just another dummy doing a hijacking, or skyjacking, I guess. And he was only 29 when Cooper was said to be in his mid-40s. And he had an alibi for the night of the hijacking. He said that he was at his family's house for Thanksgiving. So it's a typical alibi. I was at my family's house. Whatever. So the next suspect is Kenneth Christensen. Now, he worked for Northwest Orient Airlines, and he immediately caught the investigators' attention because, I mean, he would have been versed in those planes. He would have known that stuff about them. Maybe not into the exact details that Cooper did, but he did work there. So, He also served as a paratrooper in the military. After his death, Kenneth's brother came convinced that Kenneth had been D.B. Cooper, and he pointed to things like sudden wealth and strange comments. He kind of resembled D.B., um, but nothing really matched. But again, there was nothing really to match to, because again, it was the 70s. So there was not really any like good DNA samples or anything like that that they could run on through the database. Now, guarantee if this happened today, you and I are to do it, we would never get away with it. I mean, no. It took all the fun out of it. Now, the next suspect is Robert Rackstraw. Now, Rackstraw was a former Army helicopter pilot with explosives training, and experience using false identities for Army reasons, I'm sure. Over the years, journalists and independent investigators became convinced that he had the skills to pull off the hijacking. Even some believed that he left coded messages hidden in letters sent to newspapers after the crime. Uh, Not saying really that he did it, because Rackstraw denied being Cooper until the day that he died. Um, so there was really never enough evidence to confirm him as Cooper. In fact, he was most likely not Cooper. Next is Duane, and if I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, it's Duane. Duane Weber. He's the final suspect we'll be talking about. His story is quite simple. As he was on his deathbed, he looked at his soon-to-be widow and looked at her and said, "I am Dan Cooper." Again, he went under the alias of Dan Cooper. He never called himself D.B. Cooper. That mix-up was with a news outlet that mixed it up with like an actual suspect's name, which was D.B. Cooper, but he was quickly dismissed. He was nothing like Cooper, but the name stuck. So D.B. Cooper, now forever. But it was a mix-up. They accidentally called the it was under the like the headline Dan Cooper or DB Cooper, so it just stuck. So who was he? That's the frustrating part. Every suspect only seems to answer part of the mystery. One looks right, but he has an alibi. The other has aviation experience, but no physical evidence or resemblance. Another has the military experience to pull it off, but doesn't look like Cooper again. And with the evidence, there was no fingerprints, no DNA. So nothing has solved the mystery. And Dan Cooper remains one of the best American stories ever. But I think, not that it would be funny that somebody got smeared on the front of an airplane, but Cooper didn't know that those other two airplanes were there. So maybe he just became their hood ornament, and like the pilot of that airplane, like either didn't see him or just has kept quiet about it for all these years. He's probably dead now, but took that to his grave that he, made D.B. Cooper his hood ornament. I think that'd be pretty funny. Not that he died, but maybe he just went splat. After all that planning, after all of the aviation mumbo jumbo, maybe he looked it up in a book in a library and to fool everybody, and we're all sitting here like, well, if he knew about the airplanes, and he's just an accountant from like Arizona or something, and he just decided to hijack a plane just for the fun of it. Who knows, But we may never know. There hasn't really been any evidence that has come up. But that's all I have for today. Again, a lot of these mysteries are going to be dead ends because we don't know anything about them. But that's not my job to solve them. It is my job to tell you as if a friend would be talking to you and telling you about, I want to be that one friend that's like, man, this guy's weird. Won't shut up about conspiracy theories. That's me. I am him. So thank you for watching the very first episode of the Croatoan Archives. I'm gonna go edit this video, and hopefully my iPad Air 3. Yeah, I'm old. I'm cheap. I know. Hopefully it doesn't crash when I'm doing it. But I don't want to do the whole, cringy YouTuber like and subscribe thing, but it's my first video, so like, comment, subscribe, and this recording this on a Saturday should be up by tomorrow, but if not, whenever the video comes out, expect one a week later, maybe a week later. Give me a break. If I don't post every week for the first little bit, I'm still learning the ropes of editing and everything like that. So, but yeah, enough about me. I did not introduce my fish. Those are my fish back there. One of them is named Fat George. But yeah, thank you for watching the Croatoan Archives, and that'll be it.